Hey, budding lawyers, welcome to the podcast. And today we have with us Mr. Kingshuk Halder. Hi, Kingshuk.
Hi, Prasanna. How are you doing?
Good, good. So, Kingshuk has worked with Deloitte US India, Hyderabad for 3 years as a legal professional specializing in corporate laws, white collar crime investigations, regulatory compliance, commercial contracts, and forensics. He has completed his LLM course in maritime laws from the Gujarat Maritime University and also his EGMP from IIM Calcutta. So, in this episode, we'll talk about studying maritime law in India and its future. Okay, Kingshuk, firstly, I would like to know that what urged you to leave your precious job and complete your studies in maritime law?
Hi, Prasanna. As you know, I was employed with Deloitte for a period of 3 years, and Deloitte is a big four. It's audit and tax heavy firm where I was dealing with regulatory forensics and contracts. Well, my financial side was always my interest since I had a corporate law specialization in my graduation in the year 2016 when I graduated. But I always had an inherent interest in the areas of maritime and the sea. That's a childhood interest. But in India, sadly, I did not find any institution which provided a commercial side to the maritime law aspect in India, uh, actually, especially. So I thought, okay, when I saw Gujarat Maritime University, the CLAT website for the very first time in 2019 under the affiliate section, I was the first batch of Gujarat Maritime University, and it was a very new university back in 2019 when it started its course. So I decided to enroll there. Saw the course structure; it intrigued me because of my interest. Something which was very unconventional in nature. So I decided to jump ship from a very finance and regulatory side of my practice to maybe something which is not very relevant or which is not very. I'm sorry for using the word relevant. It's not very relevant. It's relevant, but it's not very well
Heard of?
practiced, heard of in the country. That is obviously there. Well, yes. So this actually intrigued me. That's basically because of my childhood interest.
Yeah, because how many people do we know, like famous lawyers who are like practicing maritime law as a full-time, practice. We forget about famous lawyers. We don't even know lawyers in our contact, in our circles, friend circles, who are practicing in such field. When I read about it, it's a very interesting field. And from what I know, I think in Indian Navy, I think there is obviously there will be a legal department, and I
Yes.
think to when you get into that, you study most of these laws, right?
No, in the Indian Navy, as you know, the Indian
Hmm.
Navy deals with a lot of maritime security aspects of the laws of maritime. So they will,
Hmm.
of course, deal with the law of the sea. They will deal with certain maritime security aspects. But what I have been taught at Gujarat Maritime University is the commercial side of maritime, which is international trade and maritime and shipping. So shipping cargoes and containers from one port to the other via transshipment ports. This is what we have been taught. But that part of Indian Navy is particularly based on maritime security, but this is something which is different. Of course, we have been taught maritime security as well, but they only deal with certain parts of maritime law, the policy making part, not the commercial aspect of it. That's the major difference that you'll find an Indian Navy lawyer doing, and maybe what a normal maritime lawyer does in, let's say, one of the admiralty courts in the country. I'll come to that. What is an admiralty court?
Yeah. So as you are talking about these, can you delve more into it? Like in your course, you studied in Gujarat National Law University. What were the subjects, and what are the subfields in this field? Like there are, in this sector, there may be various other subsectors too. As you said right now, that there is Indian Navy deals with the security aspect of it, and you deal with the commercial aspect of it.
Commercial aspect of
So
it.
apart from these, also are there any other sectors? And if yes, then what?
So I was not from NLU Gujarat. It was Gujarat Maritime University. My campus is in Gujarat National Law University. I've done it from Gujarat Maritime University. That's
Okay, it's
there.
a different university. It's not affiliated with
It's a
NLU.
different. No, it's not affiliated to Gujarat Maritime University. Although we have a collaboration. Our transitory campus is Gujarat National Law University because we do not have a campus as of now. But of course, our campus is getting built just behind in Gandhinagar. So that's there. Till the time we do not have a permanent campus, our transitory campus will be GNLU itself. So that's there, but it's a different university altogether. We do not have any link to that, of course. Now, coming to your question as to what are the other aspects that can be delved into apart from maritime security and maritime commercial aspects of maritime. Well, there can be a policy making part of it. For example, you have these think tanks called as National Maritime Foundation in New Delhi. They hire maritime researchers, which deals with the policy aspects of maritime. Well, what do I mean by policy aspects of is that they work as researchers. They, because many of these law of the sea, it's a subject called law of the sea under this thing. You have UNCLOS, United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, 1982. That's by the International Maritime Organization. It's a convention. So you must have heard about baselines and contiguous zone and continental shelf. All these are defined there. So all these come under policy making. So this is the public international law aspect that I'm talking about. So basically, if you talk about maritime, it's divided into public and private international law. Now, public international law deals with basically all these law of the sea aspect of it, and basically you can also include a bit of maritime security aspect to it as well. But private international law, as you know, is a contract between two private bodies. Yes. So where there's a contract between two private bodies, it always falls under the ambit of commercial maritime law. But in public international law, it covers policy making and all these other aspects. So when you bifurcate, always bifurcate into public and private international law. Then you can see the ambit of maritime law getting broader and wider. That's how it is.
Okay, so basically, two categories we can say, as we have studied, like lawyers who have graduated, they know there is a compulsory subject named international law, and they know the basic difference about public international and private international. So in public international, these security aspects and all will be covered. And also, what was the name of the think tank you said?
National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi.
Is it a government body? It's a private think tank?
It's a government supported body by the Indian Navy. They're supported by the Ministry of Defense, Government of India. They do research on that aspects as well, maritime security and law of the sea and all those aspects.
So is it like these think tanks also provide the data and analytics to the Indian Navy also?
Yeah. They are a proper affiliated think tank which actually works for the betterment of the maritime security region. They do a policy research on that, and the Indian Navy fully supports their research. Yeah, they rely on the research to an extent, I would say.
Okay, this sounds very interesting. Okay, so in the private international law, what are the different can you give some examples through which people can understand what type of matters are there and how lawyers practice in this field?
Okay, so maritime law is separate from the other civil and criminal disputes that we as lawyers are accustomed to, in a sense that for a civil dispute, as you know, the hierarchy of courts are maybe a district court and then a high court and then the Supreme Court, or maybe even lesser for a criminal court, maybe a magistrate's court, and then you come to a sessions judge or something. The hierarchy goes like this. In CPC and CRPC, we've read so. But when it comes to maritime, we do not have it in this fashion. For the maritime jurisdiction, the 2017 Admiralty Jurisdiction Act, that defines the powers of where the cases will lie in particularly a maritime matter, in a commercial maritime matter. So only a few designated high courts in the country, especially the coastal high courts, have been given the power to hear admiralty disputes. So, for example, if I consider Delhi High Court, if I consider Allahabad High Court, if I consider, let's say, Rajasthan High Court, all these are landlocked states. They do not have admiralty jurisdiction in their respective high courts. Whereas, you talk about Calcutta High Court, you talk about Madras High Court, you talk about Bombay High Court, Kerala High Court, Gujarat High Court, Odisha High Court, throughout the Indian coastline, any state touching the sea will have an admiralty jurisdiction. Initially, it was through the latest patent only given to the High Court of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. As you know, they are presidency high courts. Maximum of the cases were dealt with the Bombay High Court before, because of the concentration of shipping power in Bombay, because that's how it was there. Maximum of the arrest matters used to happen in Bombay. But right now, after the 2017 Act, the majority of the cases shifted from Bombay but still Bombay holds fort in the maritime matters, but Calcutta also hold the fort in the eastern part of the country. So it was Bombay in the western part, Calcutta in the eastern part, but now it has been divided after 2017 Act. So in the eastern part also you have many high courts. You have Odisha High Court, you have Calcutta High Court. Down you have the Madras High Court. Madras High Court always had it. Then in the west you have many high courts. You have Gujarat High Court. You have all these. So what does this mean is that any ship. So I'm calling this ship for my viewers and your viewers, because in the maritime language we refer it as a vessel, Vessel. So any vessel which is, let's say, disputed in the territorial limits of, let's say, Gujarat. What I mean by territorial limits is that, so basically if you look at the coastline, many of our listeners have gone to beaches for vacations, for any kind of sightseeing or anything. So when we see a beach, so we see the water touching the sands of the beach and then retreating. So if you take the length, from there the baseline starts and you calculate 12 nautical miles, that's the territorial limits of the country. What do you mean by territorial limits is that, let's say IPC 300, you actually commit a murder, and let's say you run away within 12 nautical miles of the country, the Indian police can come and catch you even there till 12 nautical miles. Till that the Indian laws apply. For us maritime, these limits actually matter. Beyond 12 till 24 is basically the contiguous zone. After that starts the continental shelf and then the exclusive economic zone, and then the high seas. So till 200 nautical miles we have the exclusive economic zone. After that we have the high seas. So till 12 nautical miles all the laws apply intact, as if it was applying to Indian territory itself. So till 12 nautical miles is India's territory. Yes. So so 12 nautical miles would be approximately 20 to 21 kilometers. That's approximately. So within the sea also 20-21 kilometers, that's considered as India's territory. So you can't run away like 20 kilometers and say that, okay, I'm safe now, because the Indian Coast Guard can apprehend you and bring you back and make you, like, arrest you, obviously. So that's how it is in general. Yes.
Okay. So as you mentioned this vessel, so I think under the definition of the term vessel, for example, if we consider the Indian Navy, there may be various, like submarine is there, then there is an aircraft carrier, then there are many other such. So these will be included in a vessel, right?
No, don't include Indian Navy. We do not include Indian Navy in our conventions, because
Private.
no, we do not include that. Any kind of government-owned vessels are not included in the definition of a vessel, particularly for commercial aspects. No Indian Navy vessels are included. Indian Navy is exempted from all these conventions, IMO conventions by the United Nations. We not include government-owned vessels, not only Indian Navy. No government-owned vessels are included. So we are dealing with only private vessels here. Vessels owned by private-owned companies.
Cargo ships and all.
Cargo ships, and we also have some like partially hydrofoil boats. We have submersibles. So all these. So we also include rigs which can float. Some of the conventions include rigs, also oil rigs which can float. There are various definitions of vessels in various types of conventions that we do have. And yes, we do not include Indian Navy vessels. That's not included. That's because that's government owned. Ministry of Defense.
Yeah. So if there are any disputes with respect to a government-owned vessel, then how it is resolved?
It depends. If there's a dispute between a government-owned vessel and a privately owned vessel, it will be dealt with the respective high court, as it happened in the like very famous case of INS Vindhyagiri, which was 2011, if I'm not wrong. It was collided in the approximately 5 nautical miles like off the coast of Mumbai. There was like 3 naval vessels which was involved in a collision with two vessels, MV Sea Eagle and MV North Lake, if I'm not wrong. So there was a very famous case which happened, if I can recall properly. So the Bombay, so it was a case involving multiple jurisdictions because the vessel owners were different, and it went to the High Court of England, and then obviously the Bombay High Court also had to intervene and stuff. So yes, if there's a dispute involving a government vessel without any involvement of a private vessel, it will be dealt with separately, because just a government-owned vessel, there will be no convention applying at all, nothing at all.
Right.
But if there's a government-owned vessel, in conflict with a private-owned vessel, in the sense that which is included in the definition of a vessel, in that sense, you will have the laws applying. Because it was seen that there was this collision regulation named COLREG in 1972 that was applied to these private-owned vessels, and the apportionment of liability had to be given by the naval vessels too. So in that sense, if there's a involvement by a private-owned vessel and a government-owned vessel, and then the collar will apply to the privately owned vessel, but the apportionment of liability, the apportionment of blame, that you have percentage of fault, that okay, you will pay this much and you will pay this much. It was seen that the naval vessels also had to shell out of a few bucks for this particular exercise. But if it's only a government owned vessel, these conventions won't at all apply at all, because they are exempted from this convention. It's always an exception.
And if there's a dispute between a government-owned vessel and another government-owned vessel,
It won't apply
no,
at all.
how the, like, for example, there are many. China is occupying like Hambantota in Sri Lanka. Then they have some,
Yeah, then it goes out of our ambit like completely. It becomes an issue of international diplomacy. It
right,
becomes an issue of
right.
yeah. So maritime law, obviously maritime law will apply, but then the Indian Navy's legal team will take over. They will actually see that whether who violated whom and everything. But obviously, they can't apply these conventions. They can
The
actually.
UN clause will apply here.
You see, UN clause is basically not for any this thing. It basically defines the zones and everything. So United Nations Convention, it defines a sea. It doesn't apply to any vessel as any particular. It defines a sea. So when you talk about 12 nautical miles, so I thought
Okay,
you were
got
talking
it.
about some other. No, it doesn't apply to any vessel as such.
Okay, so it's only defines territories.
Yes. UN clause is basically defines, let's say, the limits of the sea, like which area constitutes the high seas, like where can you fish, where can you not fish, everything. Like basically the sea. It doesn't constitute anything which is trade over the sea or any vessel plying over the sea. It constitutes a sea. It's, you can call the UN clause. It's basically there's a moniker given to it as a constitution of the seas.
Right now you said that where you can fish and all. So from what I know, there are many disputes going on between Indian fishermen and Sri Lankan fishermen. So this dispute where there is no vessel involved as such, like no dispute regarding related to the vessel, but this is something like this is my territory and you don't have any fishing rights over here. So in which jurisdiction will this come?
See, I'll tell you something. So when there's a dispute regarding to UNCLAUSE, which is UN clause, as you're saying,
Hmm.
uh, so it generally goes to the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, ITLOS. There's a tribunal, ITLOS. It's in like it's abroad. So
Hmm.
it goes to these this thing, and then it can also go for arbitration if both the parties this thing under International Court of Justice.
Hmm.
So that's how the dispute resolution mechanism is divided. So ITLOS is basically the preferred body to go for this thing, basically for dispute resolution under UN clause. It basically under UN clause, it basically covers parties, state parties, not private parties,
Hmm.
which is why it comes under public international, as I told you before.
Hmm.
So yes. So when you talk about India and Sri Lanka, so let's say today Sri Lanka comes and fishes inside the ambit of let's say the India's contiguous zone. I'm not saying territorial waters. I'm saying India's contiguous zone, or maybe near to the exclusive economic zone. So India can place an objection because India's exclusive economic zone is actually till 200 nautical miles, extendable up to 350 nautical miles. That depends on the slope and curvature of the continental shelf. That's a very technical definition.
Hmm.
You can get it in the definition of in the UN clause. So that's there. So India can raise an objection, but it can raise an objection to Sri Lanka first. If it doesn't agree, if it continues to fish, it can take the dispute maybe to ITLOS and contest it there. That's how it's done. It's very high level diplomacy. It's not
Yeah.
between not between privately owned bodies, it's between state parties.
Yeah.
So, and that will take lots of time, obviously.
Okay. So if one wants to study maritime law in India, are there many institutes offering this course?
Not many institutes offer maritime law in the country. Uh, there are a very like I won't even say handful. There's Gujarat Maritime University offering like LLM in maritime law, which is a 1 year course in India itself. There is one in Kerala, if I'm not wrong, Cochin Institute of Science and Technology, CUSAT, which does offer, I think, an LLM in maritime law. Then Gujarat National Law University, which is GNLU, they have a specialization in maritime, subject only to I think 10 students opting for it after the CLAT results. So if you don't have I think 10 students, they do not offer that course. There's something because when I was studying in my university, my campus was GNLU. I did not see any person taking up maritime, because there was no takers for it. So if there are no takers, they don't offer it actually. So it's like very scattered. I heard that Indian Maritime University also does offer, but I heard that it has stopped offering it. But yeah, if you do not want to pursue a full-fledged post graduation in maritime, you can always go for a postgraduate diploma that I think NALSAR does offer. Now there's a NALSAR Pro kind of this thing, a distance learning program that you have that offers postgraduate diploma in maritime, but not a postgraduate degree, just like other universities. But of course, as you know, India is still developing on its educational front on maritime, which is why it's an endeavor by the Gujarat Maritime Board, which is a fully owned state government. As you know, the maximum of India's coastline lies in Gujarat. It's approximately 1,600 kilometers out of 7,525 kilometers of coastline that India has. So it's almost like 1/6 to 1/7 of coastline lies in Gujarat, because and it's very strategically located as well. Yes. So Gujarat Maritime Board is one of the most efficient maritime boards. They thought that okay, we'll set up funds to set up a maritime university, and it's also a part of an ambitious project which was envisaged by the former Chief Minister of Gujarat and the current Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Damodar Das Modi. Actually, what we currently have is a full-fledged LLM in maritime law as well as an LLM in international trade law. So it's a part of a long vision that he had, and so our university is structured in that fashion. So that university offers a proper commercial maritime law LLM. Apart from that, obviously, it's still developing. The Indian structure is still developing in maritime. But of course, if you go abroad, you have lots of universities offering, and reputed universities as well. You have National University of Singapore, you have University of Southampton, you have obviously, if somebody can do it, you can do it from World Maritime University as well. You have International Maritime Law Institute in this thing, IMLI, if we call abbreviated as IMLI. So all these, you have Plymouth, you have Swansea, you have many universities in the UK offering LLM in maritime law. So there are very good universities offering abroad, but in India, it's still developing, I would say. Sadly and unfortunately, we Indians, although have a long history of seafaring, one of the most oldest ports in the country is Lothal in Gujarat. We have a long history of seafaring, but we have somehow neglected the commercial aspect of maritime. We're always focused on BTech in marine engineering, or there are many institutes offering that. Yeah, but the commercial aspects of maritime, by commercial aspects, I mean, let's say an MBA in logistics and shipping, maybe an LLM in maritime, or maybe some other, let's say a BBA in maritime. Let's say some of these kind of commercial aspects, apart from technical aspects, has been neglected by our country's educational institutes. So
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
unfortunate.
Because most of the trade of the country goes through sea, through supply chains,
Yeah.
right? And still it has neglected. So I think this is a very crucial point. I don't know
Yeah. So
what's the reason.
highlighting your point, yes, I would like to give you the figures, approximate figures. So by volume, when I talk about the world trade, and not only talking about India, because maritime is not only India. When we talk about maritime, every sea that touches every land, every shore, that comes under the aspect of my studies that I did from in LLM. So my LLM is very global. It's not concentrated in one country. So when I
Right.
talk about maritime, if you look at the sea, that very sea is touching different nations, right? So it's very global in its nature. So conventions are there for every nation. Every country who ratifies it, it's a duty and an obligation to actually follow that through a local laws, as we know the difference between a municipal law and an international law. So you ratify a convention, then you have to make a municipal law in effect to that. So as soon as you ratify a convention, it's an obligation for the country to make a municipal law in lieu of that international convention. So that's how it is, and every country ratifies it. So a convention is passed in the International Maritime Organization, which is a body of the UN, and you have various countries ratifying it.
Right.
Now, when you talk about the world trade,
Hmm.
it's approximately 90% by volume, and approximately 70 to 75% by value goes to the sea. So when I talk about 90% by volume, you can imagine that it's approximately the world trade happens by the seas.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can imagine the amount of trade that happens by the sea. And let me tell you, in fact, even even while there was a coronavirus pandemic raging throughout the world, of course, shipping was affected.
The supply chains were working.
Yeah, it was affected. I agree,
Hmm.
but it was still working. It never completely stopped because it cannot stop. Trade cannot stop between countries. It was still working, although you had flights stopped, but ships were still plying in the sea, and our seafarers are continuously working day and night to ensure that we get the necessary medicines, we get the shoes we wear, the laptop we use, the headphones that we proudly plug in. The imported products that we brag about comes via the seas, maximum of them, because air transport is costly. Many companies can't afford that.
Plus, the volume which you can transfer through cargoes is way larger than air.
Yes, that's how it is.
Okay. So, as you said that your study is quite global. So, is it like you can apply for jobs abroad too with this degree?
Yes, certainly we can apply, certainly,
Okay.
because how it happens is that although we have the municipal laws, like, well, let's say we have the Merchant Shipping Act, we have the Admiralty Jurisdiction Act, which is specific only to India, but all the conventions and all the contracts, these are international contracts. So they govern all the countries. So, for example, if I have, let's say, a contract for charter party, that contract is not only to India. So, as you know, private international law is governed by contracts.
Hmm.
Maritime law in general is nothing but a web of contracts in a very complicated manner. So consignor consignee contracts, you have all these. Then you have a concept of insurance. So you have hull and machinery insurance, you have P&I insurance, and so all these are basically contracts. So when you have contracts, that particular set of contract is given by, let's say Lloyd's. So all these are bodies. So Lloyd's is basically nothing but a classification society for vessels. In India, you have the Indian Registry of Shipping, which is called the IR class. So Lloyd's is also there in London. Lloyd's coffee shop. Why I'm saying coffee shop is that so when you talk about Lloyd's, you imagine that as I think a 17th century coffee shop in downtown London, where all these traders used to come and sip coffee and discuss their insurance deals by ringing a bell. So that transformed into a very big classification society, and it's actually this thing is still there. By the way, the coffee shop is still there. So Lloyd's has a very big history. So Lloyd's has a lot of standard terms and this thing conditions and agreements. So that is standard across the globe. Some follow it actually. Then you have NYK class. You have all these. So yeah, so it's very global in nature. So it's not that it's specific to just one country and you don't know some other laws. No, it's not like that.
Okay. So, what do you advise? Like, is it advisable to study this course in India or abroad?
For any person who doesn't want to actually go abroad and study, maybe because of many reasons, for them studying in India can also be an option, because India is actually developing its wings in maritime, because we have a maritime vision for 2030 introduced by the current Prime Minister of India. Recently it was introduced, I think, like a few weeks back, the maritime vision of 2030. We have maritime clusters coming up in Gujarat, and I saw one in Cochin, I saw one in Goa as well. So there are maritime clusters coming up. So India is actually slowly becoming the new West, as I would like to call it, because as somebody said, 21st century belongs to Asia. When I talk about Asia, I don't talk about the countries like Bhutan or Burma. I talk about India and China. I exclude China because obviously China is there are various other reasons, maybe
Hmm.
not for this video obviously, but I would like to include India. The main focus is in India. So when I talk about India, India has a strategic importance with its huge coastline, one of the largest in the world. Obviously I'm excluding Canada, US here, but in Asia, India has one of the largest coastlines because of its area landmass.
Hmm.
So when I talk about that, I talk about India becoming as the next superpower in the next 20-30 years. So when I talk about that, I urge our youngsters to explore this huge trade area left as a vacuum, because we have other aspects of law, as well, but this area has been neglected day in and day out, of course. But people with different aspirations, people who can actually afford to give the fees, because outside is very high, the fees is very high, then obviously go abroad and practice. But I would urge them to give back to the country when they after completing their LLM, of course, because our country needs them. Because abroad it's actually very well settled, but in India we are developing various arbitration centers. Gujarat is developing one. Bombay already has one in maritime. So we need the lawyers to come back to India and give back. Of course, it depends on them where do they want to do it. Certainly.
Okay, Kingshuk. So, people who are planning to take up this course after their LLB, or lawyers who are practicing but want to switch their career and get into something new or interested in maritime law. So, are there any good books which you want to recommend them?
So, so yes, as you just mentioned that for lawyers who want to shift their career from from some other area of law to, let's say, maritime. So for that, it depends on like from which aspect of maritime do they want to delve into. Do they want to delve into research or policy making or certain other academics, or even, let's say, litigation, or even the commercial side of it? There are various aspects that maritime law is divided into. So for that, uh, depends on your interest. So if you have interest in policy making and maritime security, of course, as you said, Indian Navy reports and all these but documentaries will help. Sometimes these documentaries also released. You can also see these documentaries on YouTube. There are various documentaries about how India is actually a very powerful navy, one of the powerful navies in the world, and what is it doing to counter China, and all these strategies are given. But that's obviously for that aspect. But for commercial aspect, one thing which is very much required is reading conventions. First, that's your Bible. So constitution of your sea first. If you want to understand the sea, basically, if you love the sea, understanding the seas is basically what the sea is all about. Then you want to understand the vessels or which ply on it or something. But before that, understand what is a sea. What do we call known as baselines? What do we call as contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, territorial waters, the high seas, and each and every part of this. Like today, if I tell somebody, okay, I'm sailing in the continental shelf, sorry, I'm sailing in the exclusive economic zone. So you should have in your mind that, okay, which area of sea are you sailing? What is a nautical mile that can define a exclusive economic zone, and beyond that, the high seas. So these should be very clear. First, reading the unclause. That's a convention itself. It's a huge convention. Reading it completely, maybe in a few days, it's not the matter of question. But of course, slowly by slowly, you can read the convention. Then reading the commercial side of it, the basically some of the rules, like you have Hague-Visby rules, you have Rotterdam rules, you have Hamburg rules, you have Hague rules. All these are really important for basically transport of goods from one part to the other. I'm using very lucid terms here. Transport of cargo goes from one port to the other. So how do we go about these things? It's very important. Basically, you can actually read all these things. You can read the conventions that are in place for, let's say, maritime environment, let's say a maritime labor. So all these are divided. So every area has one or two conventions. So you can read all these things, obviously. So that's how you can go about it for maybe to will help you switch better to maritime.
Okay, so how do you stay updated with the latest developments in this sector? Can you also suggest any website or blogs which helps you for this?
There are various websites, like there's one marineinsight.com. There is which actually provides a lot of news which actually is there. So maritime is a very, as I told, it's a very global thing. So let's say today a news that you may know might not be fresh for tomorrow morning for you to tell your friends and peers, or maybe your other relatives or something. So it might get old. So maritime is such a thing. So in fact, where one part of the world might be sleeping, there might be a maritime accident in some other part of the world which you might not be aware of. You wake up in the morning, you open the news, and you see that, okay, there has been a collision, let's say in the high seas between two vessels. So it's very global in nature. So keeping an update in this industry is a challenging aspect, but of course we have to keep an update, because every minute something or the other is happening in the maritime sphere. Even the coronavirus pandemic, there was an issue of seafarers getting stranded in ships. They were not allowed to disembark. By disembarking, I mean get down from the ships. So because of the coronavirus pandemic, the contracts were pending. They were in a clueless manner. So they were a lot in the news. So these type of news are actually very important. So a normal search in the net can get you some news, but of course certain websites also do help.
So I think international relations and geopolitics, the study of these two subjects will help a lot for a maritime lawyer, right?
I mean, I'm not saying that you should not know about it. I mean, of course, I'm not for any kind of educated person. these kind of issues should be studied. This is actually common for all, but yes, to an extent it does help. But for a commercial maritime lawyer, it will not help that much in your day-to-day practice. But of course, if you know that, okay, let's say what is happening in, let's say, Iraq, or let's say what is happening in Syria, so by that you can classify, let's say, a dangerous port. You will not allow your ship, or maybe if you are assigning a charter party, you will classify in a clause that, okay, I will not allow my ship to, let's say, sail in these ports. So if you're not aware, let's say, if you're not aware of the geopolitical situation in, let's say, Syria, and you by mistakenly like let your ship sail to that port, and something happens to that ship, then it's actually stupidity, I would say. Yeah, so if you, to an extent, you want to know about it, but it will not help so much that you are expecting that to help. But of course, if you're doing maritime security and policy as your career, let's say you're working for the Indian Navy or working for that, obviously then it becomes at most important. Then you have to know it every day.
Yeah, so for you all, for the private practitioners, I think getting yourself updated with the news related to businesses,
Yes,
especially international business, may help, right?
that actually helps. Yes, that actually helps more. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so if one plans to become a maritime lawyer, private practitioner, what is the procedure? Can you just tell us step by step? Like, obviously, LLB is there, and then
So there are many maritime practitioners in India who actually have done their LLB from, be it a 3-year LLB or a 5-year LLB from any university, and they are actually doing maritime practice across states. So an LLM is not a mandate. LLM is not a mandate. LLM obviously gives you an edge, because an LLM, by doing an LLM, because as you know, no university in the country in your LLB teaches you anything apart from the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. That too, they do not deal that in the graduation level with so much detail that you can expect that person to know so much. So the minimum that you're taught is a UN clause with just a minimum touching and brushing of it in the graduation level. That too, I think in the third or fourth year. So that's the only thing that they deal with. Even the premier national universities actually do not have much of a grounding in the subject of maritime, apart from the UN clause that they deal with only a very, very non-substantial basis. So because when a fresh LLB graduate comes out, the only thing they might have heard about is UN clause. Apart from that, they do not know anything. You have to study it all over again, and it takes time to grasp. Obviously, they can practice. Law doesn't disallow you to practice if you don't have an LLM. Obviously, you can practice anywhere. You just have an LLB degree, you can practice. But of course, given an LLM gives you an edge. So anybody who has an LLB can obviously read up a lot in maritime and start their practice. And if you want to take the conventional way, just do an LLM in maritime law and just jump into practice or be an in-house lawyer or something.
yeah, so you need to clear your AIB also.
Yeah, if you want to practice in the high courts, obviously AIB is necessary. But if you want to become an in-house counsel or something, then obviously, as you know, AIB doesn't allow practitioners to have another double income. So if you're an in-house counsel not going to the courts, AIB is not necessary.
So apart from that, there is no some special requirement.
No, there is no such special requirement. It's just treated as another area of law in the country where you can just do with a normal LLB degree.
Okay, so what are the career opportunities in India apart from litigation and in-house counsel, as you said, right?
Yeah, you can become an in-house counsel in these shipping companies. You can become an in-house counsel in some certain logistic companies, and you can always work at law firms. Just like you have normal law firms for other areas of law, we have law firms in maritime too. Certain law firms deal with normal like maritime, just maritime, that is specific to maritime. But certain law firms do have a maritime practice apart from their usual practice of law with other areas of law. So you can become a law firm practitioner. You can become an associate at a law firm, starting, or a senior associate, depends on your experience. You can become an in-house counsel. You can become a practicing advocate. So the areas of law with other areas of law is very much similar. It's nothing different.
The only, I think, a new opportunity which you said was the policy think tank thing,
Yeah,
where you can
yeah.
become a policy
Policy
researcher.
researcher, yes.
Okay, so are there any career opportunities abroad, like in international organization as such?
Yeah, of course. For that, you have to actually like, you can work with the IMO as a consultant, as an advisor. That depends on how much experience you have. That will only come with tons of experience. They won't obviously allow you to work with the IMO. Or so there are few stalwarts who actually work, private practitioners who actually have been invited by the IMO or called by the IMO to assist them in drafting conventions in their huge team. You'll be one of them you will give them advice. Okay, this convention is like this and like that. So only if you're called by these international bodies, you might stand a chance, but only if you're an exceptional practitioner, you might apply and you might just crack it. But internationally, apart from working with these international organizations, obviously the opportunities right now in the abroad is much more. By abroad, I mean all the seafaring nations have a lot of especially in London, in Singapore, in Dubai, all these areas. You have Hong Kong. All these areas are called the hub for maritime. So their law firms, their organizations are much more developed because they have not been neglecting maritime. They have been doing it for almost a century now. They are almost like very well settled over there. But of course, India is catching up, but it'll catch up very soon with that. So abroad, there are more opportunities, obviously, but obviously you have opportunities back here at home too in India.
Yeah, and if you want to go abroad, then you must have some experience here. Freshers.
Yeah, but depends. I mean, if you can still crack an opportunity abroad, even if you maybe you have an LLM in maritime law. If your CV strong, you might just happen to crack an opportunity with a law firm, let's say abroad. It's not a bar that you cannot do it, obviously, but obviously experience helps certainly.
Or else if you have decided previously only that you want to start your career abroad itself, then the best option would be that you go abroad and pursue LLM there.
Yes. Right. That would open a lot of gateways for you.
Okay, Kingshuk. So coming to the last question, please can you share any of the incident from your career till now, which is very memorable to you?
Yeah, Prasanna, certainly. I mean, if I recall correctly, I was employed with Deloitte from 2016 to 2019 July. So during that, I had a very good, memorable experience throughout my 3 years. But some of the incidents which I do recall from my previous work experience was that I was awarded approximately 7 times during my 3 years in Deloitte, which included 2 times I received an award from the client, and I also appointed a subject matter expert. We call it an SME in our corporate language. So during my tenure there for a project. Well, apart from that, I also have completed my executive general management program from IIM Calcutta in the year 2017-2018. Now that was fully funded by my organization, my previous organization, which was Deloitte India office of the US. Now, well, I was selected from a big pool of candidates which had applied for this, and the company had invested on my growth, where it was a full 1-year course, fully funded by them. And so that was my achievement, where my performance was taken into consideration, and I was selected from a large pool of candidates. And so that's one of my memorable experience where I had been selected for that.
Okay, so that's great, because I guess there are thousands of people working in Deloitte, and
Yes.
out of which few hundreds may have applied, and from those 100 people, you were selected. So that is quite a big achievement. And from IIM Calcutta, you pursued that course. You completed that course.
Yes.
So I'm sure that would cost around few lakhs at least.
Yes.
Even if that's
certainly
a 1-year course. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big achievement. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And thanks for this informative conversation.
Thank you, Prasanna. It was a pleasure interacting with you.
Yeah, same here, Kingshuk, same here. After you start practicing as a maritime law practitioner, we will surely have one more podcast episode.
Sure.
If you have time for it.
Sure, Prasanna. We'll look forward to it.
Okay. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you like this episode, then you must also check out our other episodes available here and follow us here so that you don't miss any new episode. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasanna.